Time to check in with Senator Roy Blunt. Senator, thanks for joining us on a rainy and somewhat dangerous morning here in St. Louis. Thank you, Senator, for joining us.
Well, rainy doesn't sound bad. Dangerous does sound bad.
Yeah.
So hopefully we get through another Missouri weather day today.
Yeah. Let's talk about this prisoner exchange. What are your thoughts as you watch this story unfold?
Well, it's something we've never done before, and there's a reason we haven't done it before. I do think it creates a dangerous precedent. Other countries have done this. Israel has done it a lot, and not too long ago they traded 1,000 prisoners for 2 or 3 Israeli soldiers. France has paid some money actually to get people back. Great Britain and the United States have never done this, and because of that, our people, I think, less of a target than they otherwise would be. I'm for whatever you can do to get somebody back who's held by the enemy, but a prisoner exchange is not the way to do that, and treating these terrorists as if they're a nation state is not the way to do that. One of my concerns is that the president is creating an environment here where at some point he can say, well, the war is over, so all these prisoners in Guantanamo can go back, and the past evidence has been when they go back, they wind up back in the fight, and they wanted these 5 people for a reason, and we shouldn't have given them these 5 people for the very reason that they wanted them.
If the opposite would have happened, Senator, where the prisoner, the U.S. soldier, would have died in captivity, and it would have come out that the president from either party could have made a deal to get him back and left the soldier on the battlefield, you don't think there would have been criticism if that would have been the story?
The idea that we somehow would find out later we could have gotten him back, and couldn't. What do you think the price should have been if we'd have released all the Guantanamo prisoners? If we would have given them nuclear capability? I mean, at some point you've got to draw that line, and there's a reason we've never done this before. So that's really the bottom line here. Is once you start dealing with terrorists for American hostages, members of the armed services or not, where does that stop, and what kind of message do you then send to the value of Americans that they take prisoners? This is not a nation state. This is not somebody we're ever going to have in all likelihood, an end of hostilities with. And McGraw, there's a reason we haven't done this. So, my question to you is, what point would you have drawn the line if they just said, let's let everybody at Guantanamo go? Is that what we should have done? Of course not.
The nice thing is, Senator, I ask the questions. I don't have to answer the questions.
It is the great pleasure of being able to ask the questions. That's exactly right. And I don't mind answering them. So that's why we have a pretty good relationship.
There you go. Congressional approval and or notification. Were you tipped off, or what's that story? Because we're hearing 2 different things. One, the administration filled you, the Congress in, and then we're hearing that it was a last-minute deal.
Well, I think maybe there's an argument that years ago they told the Congress they might think about this, but both Dianne Feinstein, the Democrat chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and Saxby Chambliss, the Republican leading member on that committee, say they weren't notified. They want answers. They're asking for answers. One of the things that Senator Chambliss asked for yesterday was, now that these people are back, let's lay their records out. Let's let the American people look at their records, open their closed records. No reason to protect them any longer. Let people see what they have done, why it was the Taliban wanted them back more than anybody else. But the people that should have been notified, the people who are head of the Armed Services Committee, the people who are head of the Intelligence Committee under the law, clearly say they weren't notified. And there's no partisan argument of Democrats saying, we were notified, and Republicans saying we weren't. Everybody's saying we weren't notified. The law requires notification. I think there are circumstances where the president could have some extraordinary situation where notification, even though the law requires it, might conflict with his role as commander-in-chief. Hard to imagine that was the case here, since this discussion had been going on for a long time. And even if they'd have missed the 30 days, they didn't have to miss the 10 days or whatever number that they could have told handful of members of Congress that the law requires. We let the intelligence operation of the country get out of control in the early 70s, and that's why not only the committees were formed, but why these various notifications have been standard for that much time now, so that the administration, no matter who's in charge, has an oversight in these areas that they didn't have prior to the 1970s.
Senator, Secretary Chuck Hagel was in Vietnam. He was on the front lines. He's now the Secretary of Defense. Did he sign off on this? I haven't heard him say anything other than back up what the administration has done. I'm curious as to his thoughts on how this all came down.
Yeah, my impression was he was supportive of it, and he announced it to troops, I think, at Bagram. And interestingly, the troops didn't have much of a reaction to the announcement that this particular individual was now back in American hands and on the way to the hospital in Germany. And however, whatever happened there, we're going to find out. I think the Army is prepared to go back now and try to determine the circumstances of that this person was captured. From a point of view of his family, surely it's a good thing that he is back with his family. From the point of view of the safety of every other person in the service, they are probably not as safe as they were when our enemies knew that we never negotiate with terrorists for hostages. And the bottom line there creates ongoing concern, and Americans serving our country are more of a target than they were last week at this time.
On to another story. We talked last time you were on the show about the VA leader, Shinseki. You were not necessarily in favor of him stepping down. You said that him stepping down might not solve the problem, and you're more about solving the problem. He has stepped down, and I think your fears might be well-founded in that people think now the problem's solved.
Well, I that was my view of it. I'm not critical of people who said he should step down. He decided to step down. The newspaper headlines the next way were something most papers like President gets a break with Shinseki stepping down. What I think happens now is that the next Secretary of Veterans Affairs gets a couple of years to try to get a hold of the situation, and then there'll be a new president, and that president will appoint another Secretary of Veterans Affairs. There'll be every inclination to give that person a year or two. This is a problem that the country needs to see solved. The country wants to see solved. More options for veterans. I was at the Cochrane Hospital last week looking into those allegations that people on the mental health side aren't seeing as many people as you would see if you were working in any other environment, and because of that, there's a waiting list. I was at the Truman Hospital in Columbia talking to them about some problems they've had. All of these veterans facilities could run better, and frankly, a little competition from the private facilities, the other facilities that people drive by to get to these veterans facilities, would probably be a good thing. My view is that the veterans facilities should really become expert at what they have every reason to be the best at. IED accidents, eye injuries, loss of limb, that kind of rehabilitation, post-traumatic stress from service-related things. They should be better at that than anybody else in the world, but there's no particular reason to believe that they're better at much of anything else. And if a veteran finds it better to go to another facility for either mental health or physical health, I think this is a great time to look at the options we might be able to provide for our veterans who should have the best care at the place they want it if we can possibly provide it in that way, and I think we can.
That's Senator Roy Blunt. Always a pleasure, sir. Be safe, and we'll talk to you next time.
Great to talk to you.
Senator Roy Blunt here calling in from Washington, D.C. 745, traffic, weather, sports. Straight ahead, Big 550.